Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and especially my esteemed students, my esteemed law students of the American University of Nigeria in Yola, Nigeria. Today, in continuation of our lecture series on public international law, we shall be looking at a very, very important topic, which is topical in the sense that it's an everyday issue. That is international humanitarian law. We have a definition of international humanitarian law, which will involve the scope and the principles. And international humanitarian law, which is also known as the law of armed conflict, regulates the conduct of armed conflicts and seeks to protect individuals who are not or are no longer participating in hostilities. Now, there are certain humanitarian principles. The IHL, or International Humanitarian Law, or IHL for short, is guided by principles of humanity, distinction, proportionality, and necessity, aiming to minimize human sufferings during armed conflicts. Now, let us look at the relevance of IHL in Nigeria, for instance. It is relevant in Nigeria in that it has been incorporated into our domestic law. Nigeria acknowledges the significance of IHL and has incorporated its principles into its domestic legal framework. Under the constitutional recognition, the Nigerian Constitution recognizes the importance of respecting and promoting international human rights and humanitarian law. Now, let us look at the statutory framework still in Nigeria, where the issue of ratification and the enforcement of these IHL principles or laws are effected. Now, under the incorporation of treaties, the Ratification and Enforcement Act serve as the mechanism for adoption of international treaties, including those related to IHL, into Nigerian law. Now, we have also responsibility of the President, with the approval of the National Assembly, to hold the power to ratify international agreements related to what? To international humanitarian law. Now, once we say IHL, there are certain conventions that immediately comes into mind. These are the Geneva Conventions. We have the 4 Geneva Conventions and the additional protocols added to that. We also have the Hague Convention. But let us look at the Geneva Conventions Act. The implementation of the Geneva Convention Act, for instance, the Geneva Convention Act incorporates the principles of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 into Nigerian law, establishing legal norms for the protection of victims of armed conflicts. We have penalties for violation. The Act provides for penalties against individuals who violate the provisions of the Geneva Convention. Now, let us also look at the judicial interpretation of international humanitarian laws in Nigeria. The courts have have the opportunity to be called upon to interpret some of these provisions in their judicial pronouncements. We have the case of, for instance, Federal Republic of Nigeria against Boko Haram. Is a 2014 case where legal actions taken against individuals and groups violating IHL principles in the context of armed conflict were pronounced. We also have public interest versus military necessity. The issue came up in 2002, where judicial decisions balancing public interests and military necessities while ensuring compliance with IHL. So it is important that military actions or military necessity must be balanced with the public interest. Now let us look at the application of IHL in domestic courts. For instance, protection of civilians. Nigerian courts emphasize the importance of protecting civilians and civilian objects during armed conflicts, which is consistent with the IHL principles, and the treatment of prisoners of war, legal considerations in cases involving the treatment and status of captured combatants in accordance with IHL. Now, there are certain challenges and contemporary issues with regards to IHL. For instance, let us look at the non-state armed groups. Now, challenges in enforcement, this includes addressing difficulties in enforcing IHL principles against non-state armed groups, particularly in asymmetric conflicts. We also have combating terrorism, that's balancing counterterrorism efforts with the imperative to abide by IHL principles in the fight against insurgencies. Cyber warfare and new technologies. We have legal gaps, for instance, exploring the application of IHL to emerging technologies, including cyber warfare, and addressing potential gaps in existing legal frameworks. We have also national and international cooperation, the need for collaborative efforts to adapt IHL to evolving technological challenges. These are very, very germane to the knowledge of IHL as it relates to public international law. In summary, international humanitarian law plays a crucial role in shaping the legal landscape of armed conflicts in the world, and Nigeria in particular. Its incorporation into domestic law and judicial applications underscores Nigerian commitments to upholding humanitarian principles during armed conflicts. Now, ongoing commitment to humanity will require that Nigeria faces contemporary challenges which involves adherence to IHL, which remains paramount. Continuous legal developments, judicial interpretations, and international cooperation are essential for ensuring protection of human dignity and minimizing the impact of armed conflicts. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Hope you had a good time listening to this topic. Bye.